Hello, and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Today, we begin the story of Robert Hansen, an American serial killer known as the Butcher Baker. Between 1972 and 1983, in Anchorage, Alaska, he abducted, raped, and murdered at least 17 women. He selected his victims, released them into the wilderness, and hunted them using a Ruger Mini 14 rifle and a hunting knife. This brutal series of crimes feels like something out of a horror movie, yet it was tragically real. On the quiet streets of Anchorage, there was once a man who greeted his neighbors every morning, while the warm scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. His name was Robert Hansen, and he was known as a diligent and skilled baker. However, behind his ordinary appearance lurked deep-seated inferiority and distorted rage that had accumulated since childhood, waiting like a hidden monster. Hansen was born in 1939 in Estherville, Iowa. His life was difficult from the very beginning. His father, Christian Hansen, a Danish immigrant, was a respected baker in the community but an extremely strict and authoritarian figure at home. He demanded perfection from his son and tolerated no mistakes, enforcing harsh discipline. During adolescence, Hansen suffered from severe acne that left permanent scars across his face. At an age when appearance mattered greatly, this caused him intense insecurity. To make matters worse, he had a pronounced stutter, which made him a frequent target of ridicule and bullying. Classmates mocked his scarred skin and awkward speech, pushing Hansen deeper into isolation. These experiences shaped him into an introverted and socially withdrawn individual, and fueled a twisted hostility toward others, especially women who rejected him. Seeking escape from his frustrations, he retreated into the forests. In the wilderness, Hansen found comfort in hunting and archery. Stalking prey in silence and taking aim gave him the illusion that he was a powerful predator in control of the world. In 1957, he joined the Army Reserve and served for a year, learning discipline. But his inner instability remained unresolved. After returning home, he appeared to follow in his father's footsteps, but in 1960, driven by resentment toward a society he felt had humiliated him, he committed arson by setting fire to a school bus garage. He was arrested and diagnosed by psychiatrists with bipolar disorder and symptoms of schizophrenia. Medical records described him as having an immature personality and a strong obsession with revenge against those he believed had wronged him. After a failed first marriage and time in prison, his self-esteem collapsed completely. Determined to prove himself to a world that had rejected him, Hansen decided to move to Alaska. In 1967, he started a new family and settled in Anchorage, presenting himself as a model citizen. He successfully ran a bakery and demonstrated exceptional hunting skills, winning several local competitions. To his neighbors, he was merely a shy but friendly man. Yet inside him, the massive reservoir of anger, built since childhood, was beginning to crack. He started roaming the dark red light districts of Anchorage, searching for targets to satisfy his predatory instincts. His early crimes began with theft and minor assaults, but over time they grew increasingly bold and violent. Hansen came to believe that the sense of domination he felt while abducting and threatening women helped soothe his feelings of inferiority. He even committed insurance fraud to purchase his own aircraft, meticulously preparing for his hunts. The hands that kneaded dough behind his bakery during the day transformed into those of a killer gripping cold steel at night. With a heart colder than the Alaskan winter, Hansen was designing a vast hunting ground across the wilderness to fulfill his warped desires. This was not merely the beginning of a crime spree, but the opening chapter of a social tragedy born from the destruction of a human soul. He deliberately targeted society's most vulnerable. To test and reinforce his sense of power, the boy once mocked for his stutter now stood behind a gun barrel, deciding who lived and who died, intoxicated by that authority. In Hansen's mind, resentment toward the classmates who laughed at him, the father who oppressed him, and the first wife who left him all merged into a single obsession with revenge. He believed Alaska's vast emptiness would allow him to hide his true nature forever. The solid mask of an ordinary baker became the perfect cover for his grotesque crimes. Thus, one man's distorted upbringing and shattered self-worth prepared to stain Alaska's endless wilderness with blood. Anchorage, Alaska was experiencing rapid growth in the 1970s due to the oil development boom. Behind the city's bright and expanding exterior, large numbers of outsiders poured in, and with them, the darker side of nightlife grew just as quickly. Robert Hansen exploited the cracks in this chaotic environment with precision. Using the financial stability he gained from diligently running his bakery, he purchased a Piper Super Cub light aircraft. In Alaska's harsh and rugged terrain, an airplane was more than a means of transportation. It was the only key to reaching vast stretches of wilderness untouched by human eyes. As Hansen learned to fly, he began to envision the stage for the horrific hunts he would soon carry out. His chosen hunting grounds were the Kanik River area, north of Anchorage, and the densely forested Matanuska-Susitna Valley. These regions were so remote that they were inaccessible without a boat or small aircraft. Surrounded on all sides by hundreds of kilometers of untouched wilderness, Hansen would first roam bars and nightclubs in Anchorage, searching for potential victims. He deliberately targeted women with weak social ties, those whose disappearance was unlikely to trigger an immediate investigation. His methods of luring victims were calculated and deceptive. Presenting himself as a humble and trustworthy baker, he offered large sums of money for modeling work or suggested a simple drive, putting them at ease. The moment they stepped into his car or plane, however, the friendly baker vanished, replaced by the cold gaze of a predator. Hansen's crimes did not end with murder alone. He displayed a sadistic nature that took pleasure in pushing human fear to its absolute limits. He transported abducted women by plane to his remote cabin, where he bound them, sexually assaulted them, and inflicted severe physical and psychological suffering. But the true climax of the horror came afterward. Hansen released his victims into the forest and told them to run. As the women fled through the woods in terror, begging for their lives, he began the pursuit with his Ruger rifle. To him, this was not merely a crime, but a ritual that confirmed the absolute sense of superiority he had craved since childhood. He projected his pride as a hunter onto these acts. The more desperately the victims hid behind trees or leapt into rivers in an attempt to escape, the more his excitement intensified. He knew the terrain intimately and took pleasure in the knowledge that no matter where they ran, they were trapped within his grasp. Looking through the scope at the terrified eyes of another human being and pulling the trigger, he fell into the delusion that he was a god. When the gunshot echoed and the victim collapsed, he approached the body as if collecting game, taking trophies from the corpse. He often kept earrings, necklaces, or identification cards as souvenirs, reminders of what he considered his victories. These human hunts continued silently throughout the 1970s. Alaska's brutal environment quickly covered bodies with snow or left them to be destroyed by wild animals, and the missing women were gradually forgotten amid the noise of the city. After each crime, Hansen returned to his bakery. As if nothing had happened, his hands once again covered in flour. To reinforce his alibi, he actively participated in local hunting groups, set new records, and strengthened the image of himself as a respectable citizen. When he spread out a map and marked each killing site with a small symbol, the Alaskan land was already saturated with countless unheard screams. Hansen overestimated his flying skills and was convinced that Alaska's vastness would conceal his crimes forever. He grew increasingly bold, and the frequency of his hunts increased. What had begun as impulsive violence evolved into a systematic and repetitive ritual of murder. After killing his victims, he carefully buried or discarded their bodies, constructing his own vast and hidden graveyard. This was a grotesque form of serial murder, rarely seen in the history of human crime, and Alaska's beautiful snowy landscape was gradually transformed into the backdrop for a brutal killing ground designed by a baker. For a long time, Robert Hansen's serial murders remained hidden in a fog of uncertainty. That silence was finally broken in the early morning hours of June 13, 1983, through the desperate courage of a young girl. 17-year-old Cindy Paulson had no idea that the man she met in Anchorage would push her to the very edge of death. Hansen dragged her into the basement of his home, chained her, and brutally sexually assaulted her. But a miracle occurred at Merrill Field Airport, where he planned to load her onto his plane and take her into the wilderness. While Hansen briefly turned away to load equipment into the cockpit, Paulson, still handcuffed, opened the car door and ran toward the road with everything she had. She overcame the terror of Hansen chasing after her and was rescued by a passing truck driver named Robert Yount. Yount took the terrified girl to safety and immediately contacted the police. Despite suffering from severe trauma, Paulson showed remarkable presence of mind. She gave the police a highly detailed description of where she had been held and of Hansen's appearance. Most importantly, she explained that she had secretly hidden one of her blue sneakers in the corner of the back seat of Hansen's car to leave behind evidence. This would later become a crucial piece of physical proof that shattered Hansen's lies. The early stages of the investigation, however, did not go smoothly. When police questioned Hansen, he appeared calm and gentle, unsettling the investigators. He emphasized that he was a respected local baker and a devoted family man. Hansen claimed that Paulson had falsely accused him after failing to extort money from him, insisting that he was the real victim. To make matters worse, his longtime friend John Henning provided a false alibi, claiming he had been with Hansen on the day of the incident. The case was close to stalling, as the Anchorage police were more inclined to doubt the testimony of a girl from the streets than that of a man with a stable job and family. The direction of the case changed with Alaska State Trooper Glenn Flood. He had already sensed that several female bodies discovered in and around Anchorage were not isolated cases. Flood focused on the suspect described by Paulson, especially the fact that he owned a small aircraft. He reached out to the FBI Behavioral Science Unit, consulting with renowned criminal profiler John Douglas. After analyzing the case, Douglas sent back a highly detailed profile. He suggested that the killer was likely a hunter, with deep insecurities about his appearance, someone who treated victims as objects and collected trophies from his murders. Trooper Flood realized that this profile matched Robert Hanson's background and hunting history almost perfectly. Using Paulson's testimony as a foundation, he began to closely scrutinize Hanson's life. Investigators confirmed that Hanson had a prior history of sexual offenses and had previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The fact that the Piper Super Cub aircraft, described by Paulson, was owned by Hanson became a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence. Flood applied relentless pressure, determined to expose the brutal nature hidden behind Hanson's gentle facade. The investigation team also examined the possibility that Hanson's alibi had been fabricated, focusing on inconsistencies in John Henning's statements. By comparing the last known sightings of missing women with Hanson's travel patterns, they became convinced that he was not just a suspect but a serial killer. All that remained was to secure a confession or uncover definitive physical evidence. Hanson continued to mock the police and insist on his innocence, but the team was already preparing comprehensive search warrants for his home and aircraft. The cooperation between local police and the FBI during this investigation became a notable example of modern investigative methods. In a case with limited physical evidence, psychological profiling, combined with the courageous testimony of a survivor, exposed the identity of a major criminal. Cindy Paulson's escape was more than an act of survival. It was the beginning of the truth rising from Alaska's vast wilderness, where it had nearly been buried forever. Hanson believed his alibi was flawless, but the memory of a young girl and the relentless pursuit of a determined investigator were breaking down his seemingly impenetrable defenses. Tension filled the Anchorage police headquarters as the mask of the butcher was about to be torn away. In the early morning hours of October 27, 1983, investigators launched a surprise search of Robert Hanson's home. From the outside, it appeared to be an ordinary and comfortable middle-class house. But the moment detectives stepped inside, the atmosphere turned cold and heavy. Throughout the search, Hanson remained calm, mocking the investigators and suggesting their efforts would be pointless. As the search moved deeper into the house, however, subtle tension began to show on his face. The team discovered a narrow, dark hiding space in the attic, and from there, some of the most disturbing trophies in the history of human crime began to emerge. Inside the hidden attic space, personal belongings of missing women were found one by one. Earrings, necklaces, and identification cards bearing the victims' names were arranged almost like medals. This discovery matched perfectly with the trophy collecting behavior predicted by FBI profiler John Douglas. Investigators also found multiple firearms, including the Ruger mini rifle and a .357 Magnum revolver used in the crimes. The most critical piece of evidence was an Alaska aviation map hidden near Hanson's bed. On the map, no fewer than 37 X marks were carefully drawn. These marks represented death coordinates, the locations where he had buried his victims after completing his hunts. When investigators questioned Hanson about the meaning of the map, he initially claimed the marks showed successful hunting locations, but as the team pressured him by comparing the marked sites with locations where victims' remains had already been found, his defenses collapsed. Ballistic tests confirmed that shell casings recovered from crime scenes had been fired from Hanson's Ruger mini rifle, and he finally began to confess. What Hanson revealed during interrogation was so brutal that even seasoned investigators would never forget it. He admitted that he did not view the women he abducted as human beings, but merely as targets to test his hunting skills. Hanson described, with an emotionless expression, the thrill he felt as women fled into the forest after being released from his plane. He said the farther they ran, the greater his sense of achievement, and that the moments when they begged for their lives were when he felt the most powerful in his entire life. He recited the names of the women he had killed, detailing how each victim resisted and how he overpowered her. At times, Hanson even blamed the victims themselves, shamelessly claiming they deserved what happened because they angered him or refused to obey. Police escorted Hanson to the locations marked on the map and began verifying each site. Across Alaska's vast plains and deep forests, frozen ground was dug up, and with each excavation, cold remains were brought back into the light. As the bodies of women such as Sherry Morrow and Joanna Messina were discovered, Cries of grief from their families filled the land. Most of the victims were found unclothed and buried in shallow graves, and Hansen recalled the circumstances of each burial as vividly as if it had happened the day before. Even while revisiting the scenes of his crimes, he appeared to feel no remorse. Among the items recovered from Hansen's home, investigators found a fish-shaped necklace belonging to Andrea Altieri, confirming her murder as well. Hansen confessed that after killing her, he placed her body in a duffel bag and threw it into a river. The X marks on the map were not simple location indicators, but a record of madness carved by Hansen's twisted soul. Beyond the 17 murders he confessed to, investigators expanded their search to the remaining marked sites, acknowledging the possibility of additional victims. The horrific truth hidden in the attic of a baker's home delivered an irreversible shock to the once peaceful citizens of Anchorage. The evidence secured through the search and site examinations was powerful enough to ensure Hansen would spend the rest of his life in prison. He believed his crimes would remain forever buried in Alaska's vast wilderness, but a single mark he left on a map ultimately led to his downfall. Hansen saw himself as a meticulous hunter, yet in the face of true justice, he was nothing more than a desperate criminal with nowhere left to run. The traces of tragic souls hidden in the darkness of the attic tore away Hansen's mask completely and placed him on the stand of judgment at last. When the full scope of Robert Hansen's brutal crimes was revealed, the entire state of Alaska was engulfed in anger and grief. The trial, which began in early 1984, became a historic and unprecedented proceeding due to its scale and sheer horror. Hansen initially denied all charges in an attempt to escape justice, but the ballistic test results secured by investigators, the trophies discovered in his attic, and the decisive testimony of Cindy Paulson ultimately left him with no way out. Under Alaska's legal system, which does not allow the death penalty, he was sentenced to a total of 461 years in prison with no possibility of parole. As the verdict was delivered, the courtroom filled with the sobs of grieving families and the heavy sighs of citizens. The judge strongly condemned Hansen's actions as the lowest and most savage form of behavior possible for a human being. During the trial, Hansen attempted to negotiate with investigators. In an effort to reduce his sentence, he offered to guide authorities to the remaining burial sites marked on his map, and to assist in recovering the bodies of victims who had not yet been found, in exchange for transfer to a federal prison. Even then, he continued to deceive investigators, denying responsibility for certain murders or claiming he could not remember them. In some cases involving unidentified women, he demeaned their social status in an attempt to justify his actions. This attitude further convinced the public that he was not simply mentally ill, but a classic psychopath, incapable of feeling empathy for the suffering of others. Hansen was initially transferred to the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where he began his prison sentence. He was later returned to Alaska, spending time at Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau and Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward. Inside prison, Hansen remained quiet and largely unremarkable, much as he had appeared in public before his arrest. However, correctional officers later testified to moments of disturbing obsession. He seemed to repeatedly relive his hunts in his mind, and showed an abnormal interest in the possibility of his crimes being turned into books or films. As time passed, he grew older and increasingly frail. On August 21, 2014, he died of natural causes at the age of 75 in a hospital in Anchorage, bringing an end to his horrific life. Although Hansen's death closed the legal chapter of the case, the wounds he left behind remain deeply etched into the vast land of Alaska. The case became a milestone in American investigative history, demonstrating how critical criminal profiling could be in capturing a serial killer. The determined cooperation between John Douglas and investigator Glenn Flood set an important example for modern forensic investigation, and became a foundation for future serial crime investigations. The case also exposed serious flaws in law enforcement at the time, particularly the neglect of missing persons reports involving sex workers and runaway youths. Painful reflection followed, acknowledging that social indifference and prejudice had allowed Hansen to continue his hunts for more than a decade. Today Alaska's beautiful snowfields and dense forests still stand in majestic silence, but beneath that beauty linger the unheard screams of the innocent souls who fell victim to Hansen. Families return each year to the sites where bodies were found, laying flowers in remembrance of their loved ones. Cindy Paulson's courage has become a symbol of hope for victims of violent crime. Hansen may have wished to be remembered as a great hunter, but history records him as a small and cruel murderer who sought to soothe his own inferiority through cowardly slaughter. The cold Alaskan wind may try to wash away the traces of that tragedy, but the lessons of this case must never be forgotten. The madness hidden behind the grotesque nickname, Butcher Baker, and the battle for justice that stopped him, continue to be revisited through documentaries and films. This is not meant to sensationalize the story, but to understand the nature of evil that thrives in society's darkest corners, and to remain vigilant so that such tragedies are never repeated. Robert Hanson's 461-year sentence has ended, but the pursuit of justice, the restoration of the victim's dignity, and the hope for a safer society are still ongoing. The truths once buried beneath frozen ground have now been brought into the light, proving the enduring value of justice. That concludes today's story. Please subscribe and like the video. Thank you for watching.